Hello and welcome to Cloud Force Vibes. So today I just want to take a quick look around again. I have some oddballs I figured we'd pull out and take a look at and talk about. You don't see them much, I don't talk about them much. Honestly, some of them aren't doing much. I'm still figuring a lot of these orchids out, and to be fair, I'm kind of new to a lot of them, so I just want to take a look at them, kind of show them to you guys, talk about what I do and what I've had success with, what I haven't had success with, and kind of go from there. So for now, give me a minute. I need to get a few things set up because this shooting angle is great for an intro, but it's really hard for me to talk because I'm just about as tall as my greenhouse is, so I can't quite get in here and talk to you guys. I'd love to find a way, but as of yet I have not figured out how, because either way it's just not good. So I will get set up in a different angle, and I will be back with a few plants at a time, and we can go ahead and talk about them a little bit more in depth and go from there. So welcome, and here we go with some oddballs and some plants that are less seen or hardly ever seen in my collection. This is my Ionella polystichus. I'm not quite sure if I'm saying that right, especially the first part, but that is what I've got. I'll put the name on the screen because it's definitely a tricky one. This is an angraecoid. It kind of grows, you know, like a vanda. It's monopodial, I guess, if you will, but I do have a new growth coming on right here, and I have a new one coming on a little bit higher up back here. I guess you'd call that a keiki. Either way, this is somewhat new to me. I've had this plant about 6 months. It had some leaf damage when I got it, though it was definitely a spectacular plant. I've put on some really healthy new leaves throughout the winter, and I'm very excited to see what happens with these new growths and to try to see if I can get this to bloom. It likes to grow moist. I do not ever let this dry out fully. It's spongy dry, but not crispy dry, and it's about the time that I would water this. So we'll go ahead and give this a spray now while we have it out, because it is definitely time. It has aerial roots, as you can see. I like to make sure I get them if I'm watering this. And I water this with my medium strength solution, so that's my 150 to 200 part solution. Right now I think, what are we running? 208. So right now it's actually not getting fed. I think it got fed last Sunday. It got a flush, and I'm just getting it back into its cycle. So right now we're going to go ahead and give it CalMag instead of its feed, and on Monday we're going to double back and give it a little bit of MSU with probably some calcium nitrate, because it's definitely heavily in growth. This has an amazing looking flower. I will go ahead and find a picture of it and throw it up. But that's my Ionella polystichus. Again, it's you know, it's a small to medium sized orchid. I don't think it's done growing yet. Yep, no, it's got another leaf forming right there, so it's going to continue to grow. It's supposed to have a pendulous habit. The flower spikes are pendulous as well. The flowers are very angraecoid. You'll definitely be able to tell from the picture, if I haven't put it up already, that this is definitely an angraecum, or an angraecoid. So that's Ionella polystichus, and again, it grows intermediate to warm. I think now that it's getting warmer, it's really getting happy. It's starting to really take off. So that's one of the oddballs I have. Really neat angraecoid. I love angraecoids, and yeah, that's it. So we'll move on to the next plant and see what other kind of oddballs we have. Okay, so these are two Moma Like Us species. Moma Like Us are a offshoot or subspecies of Maxillaria. I guess it's its own genus now, just like Tolumnia is to Oncidium, but either way, these are, or used to be, part of the Maxillaria tribe. So having that said, they do like to grow a specific way. These two are intermediate to warm. I believe this one is a lot cooler tolerant than this one is. This one really slows down during the winter. I just got this plant in the spring, so take what I have to say for a grain of salt, but it came in a very rootless manner, and I do have lots of new roots coming on this plant now, and I've got new growths coming, at least there, and it looked like this was trying to for a little bit, but I guess we'll have to see. So these two plants, this is Moma Like Us Schweinfurthiana, and this is Moma Like Us rufescens. I'll put a pop-up up of this with the name and what the bloom is supposed to look like. And I will also put one up of this so you guys can distinguish them from one another. But you can see they have a pseudobulb. This one has a creeping, kind of climbing nature. This one has more of a clumping habit, but does have kind of a linear growth habit as well, so it will climb if you decide to put it on a mount, or if you put it on a pot, it will progress, so you will ultimately have to repot it because it will climb out of the pot. It's not going to be such a clumping manner like some Maxillaria species do. Unlike a lot of their Maxillaria cousins, Moma Like Us tend to like much lower light levels. They do not like high light. I actually had some issues with these in the beginning. You can see some of the damage on the leaves. Some of it, this brown stuff here and other things came with the plant when I got it from Equigenera about 1.5 years ago. And same deal here, the rootlessness and some of the leaf damage and things like that. I've inherited that, so hopefully we can grow on some clean new growths. This here is my first mature new growth from this plant. It's produced some roots. I have another new growth forming here. This small, different division, it broke into 2 pieces, and this produced a nice small seedling size pseudobulb, but also larger than its last growths. So that is progressing on as well. So this plant is doing well for me. I haven't seen a bloom yet, but it is a spectacular one. Both of these are, and this is supposed to have like a vanilla kind of scent to it, so I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing this one day. And this one kind of looks like a Lepanthes, which you guys already know my obsession and my love for my Lepanthes orchids, so anything that can kind of mimic that or simulate that is very, very sought after to me. And this is one of those plants that I've seen for a long time and kind of questioned whether I could grow. I've seen controversial information on it. Sometimes people say it's a cool growing species, sometimes people say it's a warm growing species, and just about everything in between. So I finally pulled the trigger. What that kind of tells me is it's probably not so fussy. As long as you keep the light in check and don't grow it too wet, then you should be able to grow it pretty well. So far so good. We have, like I said, new roots forming, and it does seem to be pushing up at least one new growth off of one of the divisions that came to me. So I am very hopeful about that. But those are Moma Like Us. Those are the 2 that I have. There are other species out there, but they are really, really cool to grow, really easy to grow, and I'm just trying to get them to bloom at this point in time. They do grow very well for me, and I think it's only a matter of time at this point once they get better acclimated to my environment and everything else. So that is Moma Like Us Schweinfurthiana and Moma Like Us rufescens. Okay, so since I pulled out the Moma Like Us Schweinfurthiana, I figured I'd also pull this out. This is a Pleura phallus Schweinfurthii, and I did bloom this in the fall or winter. I'll throw a few pics up of that because it's a spectacular bloom. It really is. I've put on a lot of really nice, clean, healthy new growths since I've gotten this plant. Some of them are really new. It had a terrible allergy problem when I got it. Some of the leaves didn't clean up all the way, but It really hasn't done bad. It really is a cool plant to grow. It grows intermediate for me. It does get a bit warm in my grow environment for this. However, it really doesn't seem to mind. I do keep it pretty moist. I have this in a small bark, medium bark, perlite, and sphagnum moss mix, and I do not ever let it fully dry out. It gets, I let the moss on top get spongy, dry, just like the mounts, and once I get to that point, I do water it again. So, having that said, once again, we're at that point, and being a pleurothallid, I'm never scared to go ahead and give this thing a good flush. I do flush it with pure, clean, filtered water every time I do water it, feed it, or supplement it, or anything before I give anything else to it. It has very fine roots. I don't know if you guys can see that in there. Maybe we'll do this. Let's see if we can prop it better. So you should be able to see that. It has some very fine roots. They do like to cling the bark, but they do not like to dry out all the way. Think of this as more like a Masdevallia or something like that with the watering schedule, perhaps a Lepanthes, where it does want a good amount of air around its roots. However, it does not want to be soggy. It does not want to be wet at all times. And I give it a good soaking about once a week, most of the time, most of the year, and other times I just water it whenever it's kind of getting towards being a little bit dry. So it's a small sized orchid. Pleurothallids, believe it or not, especially the Pleurothallus true proper, get very large, some of them. So this is not quite micro, it's not quite medium, definitely a small sized orchid, but bigger than you might imagine some Pleurothallus orchids being. So it has kind of a pendulous habit. I've really toyed with the idea of mounting this orchid many times. It still might end up on a piece of cork one day, you know me, but that's it. That is Pleurothallus schweinfurthii, and we'll go ahead and grab something else and take a look at it. So here we have another orchid that you probably haven't ever seen. It grows really well for me, but another one that I have issues with blooming. This is supposed to be kind of a tricky one to bloom. It's very light sensitive, it's very moisture sensitive as far as that goes. I believe it needs somewhat of a rest period, even though I'm not resting it, I think, to its potential. That might be its issue. I've recently started giving it more light. This is, before I get any farther into this is Diplo columbium forainiferum. I'll put a pop-up up of the bloom because, again, I have not bloomed this yet, but you'll see exactly why I got this plant. I love spidery blooms, and this bloom has, this orchid has a really nice spidery looking cool bloom. So I'll throw a picture of that up and then we'll continue. So I got this plant almost 2 years ago. I've had this for a long time. It's a thoroughbred. It grows really well for me. I mean, it's grown into a nice bush. It's a subsection of the dendrobiums, Diplo columbium is, and I believe this comes from, this comes from New Guinea. It's an intermediate grower. It's supposed to like bright shade, but I've started to give it, again, a lot brighter light. I did singe it a bit, so I've moved it back. Actually, I've just thrown a plant over top of it, so now it's getting some filtered sun. The newest of the growths that are coming out, they're coming out really nice. They're large, they're nice and tall. This has a creeping habit. It had 1, 2, 3, 4 distinct sections when I unmounted it from the stick that I got it on, and it has really, again, pushed on quite nicely. It's got tons of new growths coming up again, roots all over the place. It's supposed to be a moist grower, but coming from New Guinea, I do feel like it's going to have a wet and a dry season, at least a slightly drier season. So this coming winter, I do plan on growing this plant quite a lot drier. When it grows, it almost always grows with a sheath, and that's not necessarily a sign that it's going to bloom. This is one of those tricky ones. So until I can figure out the light and the dry rest or the drier winter cycle for this plant, I do not expect to see any blooms, but it does again grow really well for me. So Diplo columbium farniferum, this is another one of my kind of tough ones. It's an oddball. You don't see it quite that often, and I do love it, but I really wish I could get this plant to bloom. So it's growing quite well, and I hope we can continue the progress and one of these days get to see some flowers from this awesome plant. So let's find another one, and we'll continue on. So here's another plant that I have. It's in desperate need of a remounting. I just don't like the cork tile that it's on, but it's a really great plant. This is Psychopsiella lemengii, and it's a Oncidium Alliance. It's a cousin, I guess, or very closely related to the Psychopsis. I don't know if you can tell by the patterning on some of the leaves or not. I got this from the Tarzane group, another awesome plant. It did have 2 new growths on it when I got it that I promptly somehow killed with over moisture or over watering. Somehow it got watered down in the leaf joints, the bract, and it just wiped it out. So I'm really kind of struggling to grow this, but it needs a new home. I'm going to put this on cork bark soon and just hope that it does better. But it's a really cool plant. It has a really awesome bloom. I'll throw a picture up of that. I'm really excited to see it bloom. I really just need to get it to grow at this point in time, honestly. Like I said, I'm not doing so great with this, but it is something I'm really excited about. I was excited to get it, and I hope I can get it to push on. But that's my Psychopsiella lemengii, or Oncidium lemengii. Another neat plant. We'll have to check in on that and see how we do, because right now, again, we're not doing that great. So this little guy right here, and I do mean little, is an Oncidium Coloratum. This is a Brazilian species of Oncidium. I believe Gomessa is also another genus that it goes by, or went by. It's hard to tell. It comes, again, from Brazil. It grows in intermediate to cool conditions. I've had another real tough time growing this plant. I do keep it now in the big grow tent because it gets a lot better of a temperature fluctuation there. I found that the temperature fluctuation is very important for this orchid. It does not like to get too warm, so in the hottest months of the summer, once it's around 80 degrees or so in that grow tent, I do tend to throw it in the small tank for those months just so I can keep it cooler, just like I do with several other miniatures that I do grow, because I do tend to grow a few real cool loving species, and I find that it's difficult to grow them in the tent year round. Sometimes they need a break, sometimes it gets too warm in there and they just need a jump in humidity to deal with the warm temperatures. Fortunately enough, those plants are all miniatures and they do fit inside the tank, but it is a constant struggle sometimes on an independent or individual plant level to determine what the plant needs and what it is happy with. So this plant here has really gorgeous blooms that I haven't seen yet. Another one. So another plant that I'm still trying to figure out, but it is growing really well for me. It started this past year to really take off. The roots are starting to cling to the mount and go just about everywhere. I think it needs to get the moss freshened up. What I'm thinking about doing is actually putting some live moss on this plant and seeing how it does with that. I believe it'll make a world of difference. I'll probably do that on camera, so that might be something we do here. I have a long weekend. I have an extra day off, so I have some plans to make some extra videos this weekend while I have some time, and I will share whatever I do with you guys in the greenhouse, and around the greenhouse related to the orchids and carnivorous plants and whatever else we decide to do. So this is another one that I got again from Andy's Orchids, a great supplier. You don't see it a lot. I do consider it an oddball, and again, I just can't wait to see it bloom one day for me. So again, so this is Oncidium Colora, and it's another oddball, another unique species that I grow and I'm still trying to figure out, but definitely wanted to share with you guys. So our next species that we're going to take a look at is Cycillus olivaceae. This also goes by Epidendrum olivaceae. Again, they changed names up so much it's hard to keep track of, but I bought it as a Cycillus olivaceae. This is a Haitian species of orchid. It likes bright light, warm to intermediate temperatures, and needs a wet dry cycle, moist dry cycle, just like a Cattleya or something of that nature. When I got it, it was on a stick. The stick was rotting. I left it on for the winter time because it was kind of dormant and there wasn't any root activity that was worth trying to take the risk of peeling it off and getting it onto a new mount. But this spring I went ahead and remounted it. Since then it's pushed on several new roots. Oop, almost knocked it over. It's got the very tip of another new root starting here. This is last year's growth and this is this year's growth, so we've got a nice leaf jump. It's definitely progressing, which is a great sign. I'll throw the picture up of the bloom so you guys see why I absolutely had to have it. A neat fact about this, it kind of, in the way of blooming, is similar to a Cycopsis or something like that. The bloom spike supposedly progresses on and can live for several years at a time and just continuously flower and bloom sequentially, like I said, for years and years at a time. I think 2 years or something like that is what I read. I'm very eager to grow this on. It seems pretty happy now that it's on its own new and clean piece of cork bark. I have just a thin layer of the dried sphagnum moss or the zombie moss on here, and it gets watered just about every other day. Again, I treat it just like I do a Cattleya or one of my other encyclias or something else that needs a wet dry cycle. So that is Cycillus olivaceae, and it's another one of my neat little oddballs that I keep that you guys don't see very often. So here we have an orchid that we actually have taken a look at before, but I haven't spoken too much about. This is a Bulbophyllum orchid, believe it or not, and you'll understand why I say that when you look at the foliage of this plant. There is no distinct pseudobulb, there's no distinct leaf. It actually has these somewhat succulent and fleshy leaves, and believe it or not, again, this is a Bulbophyllum. This is a Braca Stacey mini repens section species Bulbophyllum. I don't have the exact species name of this plant, unfortunately. This is another one of those gems from Andy's Orchids that I picked up, I believe, in the fall or early winter, and I've continued to grow on. It has done really well for me. Unlike most Bulbophyllums, this plant needs a wet dry cycle, which kind of to me explains scientifically why it would have such odd growth habit in the foliage. It doesn't need a pseudobulb, it doesn't need a leaf. It has combined both attributes to fit what seems to me to be a drier lifestyle. So I have this mounted again with just a scraping of moss. This kind of gets watered just like my Cattleyas or other plants, Columbias, things like that, that need a wet dry cycle. It has pushed on several, 4 or 5 new growths for me since I've got it. They're still growing. When they come out, they look more like a normal leaf, and then I imagine once they get to their mature size, they'll start to fill out and become more succulent and start to provide more of a backbone for this plant. It has a very, very interesting bloom. Very weird. Again, I love oddballs. I love things that are out of the ordinary, and this absolutely fits the bill. So I'll throw a picture of that up, and you'll see why I had to have this plant in my collection. just another true oddball, another true joy to grow, very easy to grow, especially for a Bulbophyllum, because you really don't have to worry about missing a watering or two just in case you do. So this is again Bulbophyllum species section Braca Stacey mini repens. I believe you can still find this at Andy's Orchids if you do live in the United States and are interested in a true oddball Bulbophyllum. So here's another miniature. I actually pulled this out of the tank. I've grown this in both conditions, and it just for whatever reason seems to really do well with the extra boost of humidity. When I did a little bit more research on this plant, I found that it comes from a very swampy, very humid area, very moist area in Brazil, and I think that's why it does much better with the boost of the high humidity from the tank. I think it's getting enough light. Actually, it might be getting too much. It's got a little bit of light color here in the leaves. But this is another oddball species that I picked up again off of Andy's Orchids, and this is Barbosa gardeneri. It's very temperature tolerant, warm, intermediate, cool. It grows in bright shade. It likes to be moist. I give it a daily watering. It doesn't seem to mind to dry out gently in between waterings, but it definitely does not want to dry out for too long. I'm going to go ahead, excuse my shadow, and get in here a little bit closer so you guys can take a better look at this plant, because it really is neat. It has a vining, kind of rambling growth habit. Let's see if I can do this without making too much noise. Anyhow, so it has a vining, rambling kind of growth habit. I've mounted it with sphagnum moss on this long, skinny piece of cork, and it has just kind of started to take over finally. I've had this plant about 2 years, and it likes, again, really, really high humidity. It did survive quite well in the grow tent for the first year I had it, but I did move it into the tank once I got the big one built, and it has really, again, taken off in all sorts of directions and new root growth and everything since I've done that. So it does seem to appreciate the higher humidity. I was able to bloom this. I will throw up a few pictures of that, and you'll see why it's just a really nice miniature to have. I can't wait. I can't wait for this whole thing to be smothered in blooms one day. If you guys are familiar with the Barbosa genus, sometimes when they form the full mat and when they really get grown out, they can really put on quite a show for a miniature. So that is Barbosa gardeneri, and that is again a overlooked orchid in my collection, but nonetheless a really, really neat plant. So that's it, and I think we'll poke around and maybe find one or two more to look at, but I don't want this to drone on. I don't want it to get too long. I just wanted to show you guys some neat plants and get you guys thinking about some other different types of species and genus of orchids that you really don't see that often. So I'm going to go ahead and make this the last plant for today that we talk about, but this is my Kranzlinelia anfracta, or Pleura phallus anfracta. I believe this is another one that has name discrepancies if you go to look it up or look up information on it, so if you go by both names you might be in better luck. I have struggled with this plant as well. It is a terrestrial plant. I do not grow terrestrials that well. I have recently this spring repotted it into repotme.com's terrestrial mix, and it seems to be doing okay, but I don't think my conditions are ideal for this plant. I think it wants much cooler conditions. I have a friend in Colorado, Joe. His Instagram is Perpetual Irish. He has some really awesome cool growing species. If you guys are on Instagram, you really need to check him out. I'm going to throw a pop-up up of his name somewhere in here so you guys can go check him out and see some of his awesome plants if you guys want to. Good friend of mine. We chat all the time. We bounce ideas off of each other, and we're both kind of miniature nutcases and cloud forest nutcases, so we do grow very similar plants, and some of the species we grow are actually the same, but he grows them much better than I do, I'm not gonna lie. So Joe, here we go. This is my Kranzlinelia anfracta. I've got some weird stuff going on with the leaves. I think I had some bacterial issues. I had it potted before with a whole bunch of sphagnum moss in it, and I don't know if maybe the pH got off or something. It's still potted, but seems to be doing well. It's growing some roots, and it's got 2 new growths coming out that have come out recently, one here and one there. Most of my newest growths, they're big, they're doing okay, but again, it's just really not the happiest plant. I'm hoping this season I can get a better hold on this. I might end up mounting it. I know you have yours mounted, Joe, and it looks great, and it definitely seems to appreciate it, but I'm going to give this a run for now until about the fall and see what exactly happens with it. But awesome bloom. Kind of looks like a love child of like a, I don't know, some sort of weird Phallus or Lepanthes and a Bulbophyllum, or one of the Bulbophyllums that has a triangular shape to it. I'll throw up a picture of it. I cannot wait to get this thing to bloom, or at least be happy enough to grow well. So that's it for today. I will take us back in the big grow room and we will wrap this video up. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate everybody who tunes in and watches all this stuff. I know I might ramble a bit, but I really am just excited to show you guys some neat plants and try to give you guys some tips and tricks on how to grow them in your home. I grow some challenging species, and one thing that I've been determined to do my entire existence as a grower is defy the odds and defy all the stereotypes and show everybody that it's possible to grow just about anything you want in the home as long as you put your mind to it and pay attention to the environmental conditions that you're providing the orchids. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in. I love questions and comments again, so anything you guys have to say or any questions you may have about how I grow or any of these plants, please feel free to leave in the comments. And until next time, happy growing, and I hope you guys are all staying safe. See ya.